Some people are architects, but I would say most people aren't. Most people are archaeologists. This framework is an approach to how to build things. And so the architect is a person who has a really clear vision in their mind of what they want to create. They can see the house. They know how to do all the drawings to kind of step them there. They're totally singularly focused. So the other path is the archaeologist. And so the archaeologist doesn't have a clear vision in their mind of what they want to create, but they're prepared to explore an area and dig. And I like explaining that framework because I think it gives so many people permission to just start.
Welcome to Process the Podcast. I'm your host, Arielle Thomas, motion director, social strategist, and founder of production company Cinema Tom. Process is your home for creativity as I interview the world's top creatives as we hear all about their unique creative process. If you love this episode and this channel, please hit like and subscribe so that we know you're there and we can keep creating episodes that you will love. Let's dive in. I know you from the Lady Brains world.
Yeah.
Which was a very important part of my career.
Search?
Yeah, that support that you had. I feel like my podcast now stands on the shoulders of what you created.
That's so nice.
It's true.
It makes me want to cry.
30 seconds in, we're already there.
Great.
But it's true because I think just how welcoming you were, setting up dinners. We did like workshops at your house.
Like this.
Yeah, literally. Like I think there's such a, even though it's also probably because like, oh, well, it's sort of, we don't want to hire a space. That hits the margin. This also hits the margin for me to be renting a podcast studio, but it sort of works in turn to invite guests into my home to record. And you guys doing that has set up this just idea of intimacy that I carry into business today, and the way that you guys did things formulaically of like what you're interested in, how to do things with the Post-it notes and the butcher's paper and all the bits and all those things that you did. I think you provided so much confidence for women, even like CC Stefanovic at the moment with that brand was built at the butcher's paper at your house.
I know.
She was my partner.
I remember. And I actually caught up with her for a drink like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And we had this exact conversation.
Yeah.
She was like, do you remember 6 years ago or whatever it was, like I was conceptualizing this beauty brand in your lounge room?
Yeah.
And I was like, far out, yes.
Like there were a lot of women in that room and you just don't sort of know where everything took them.
I know.
But anyway, now you are yapping away in the best way on Substack, which firstly, I have a lot of questions about Substack as in like
happy to share
that. There's so much I want to go through, but you really talk about a portfolio career. So I would love to know, what is a portfolio career?
Great question. So I define a portfolio career as one that kind of sits outside the traditional way that we think about work. So typically we think about work as either being a full-time employee, so having a full-time job, or otherwise being a full-time founder, going all in on your business. And I have been both of those things. I've had full-time jobs. I was a full-time founder at Lady Brains. And now I have what I call a portfolio career, which is basically a career that's made up of lots of different types of things. So the best thing about portfolio careers in my mind is that every single person's looks different and it's totally unique, you know, customized, personalized, depending on kind of your strengths, your interests, what you want to do, the value that you want to add, the type of, you know, work that you enjoy. Like it is a career that sits outside a box.
And it's so multifaceted.
It is.
And there's so many parts of it that like sometimes I have a bit of shame. For example, Cinema Tom is taking on a certain amount of social media clients at the moment because they're coming part and parcel after me doing strategy work for clients being like, can you just plug all this in and be our social media manager? Yes, I can. So we've put those things in place because who doesn't love a retainer? And now I would call, if I didn't have the banner of Cinema Tom, which people call an agency, it would be a portfolio career. 100%. I sort of think I do have one because I consult and I do all these other bits. I have a podcast, all the things. But I think people feel really confused and like that energy of, oh my gosh, I do so many things, I don't know what to focus on. It's actually okay that you have so many beautiful things that you don't need to work that out. It's actually fine.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting. So earlier this year, I did a big piece of discovery research as I was starting to, I've had a portfolio career for a couple of years, but I've only just started to have the language and started to talk about it in the last 6 months. And when I first wrote about portfolio careers, my Substack just went completely crazy and it just struck a chord and it resonated with so many people who were like, I do this, but I never had a label for it. And I always felt so much shame around this type of work structure because everyone was like, didn't understand what I did, and I also didn't have the language to communicate what it is that I do. And when I conducted this big piece of discovery research where I interviewed like 20 or 30 people, surveyed about 250, one of the biggest themes that came through was people being like, I am so ashamed of this work structure because I come into a room, people are like, what do you do for work? And I go, oh, well, I do a bit of this and I do a bit of that. And, you know, there's no confidence around kind of what they were doing. And so I've made it my mission to rebrand the portfolio career because in my mind,
I love that.
It is like, well, I'm on a mission to rebrand it as something that's really aspirational because if I think about it, like the full-time job or the full-time founder thing is amazing for some people, particularly if you're a specialist and you have a specialized skill set and you really want to go all in on one thing. But there are so many people, creatives, generalists, multi-hyphenates who don't feel fulfilled doing one thing or being put into a box. And so it's like, why can't we create a work structure that is fully our own and that is like a full expression of who we are? That's how I see a portfolio career. It is like the ultimate version of self-expression, the ultimate form of self-expression. And to me, I'm like, that is fucking aspirational. Like that is such something to strive towards. And I believe that so wholeheartedly.
I love it.
And like that is really part of my whole mission with Substack and all the things that I write about and post. It's like, no, this is a legitimate career. Like I have worked on some of the best projects of my career in this structure, being outside of a full-time job or a full-time business. And so, yeah, I just think there's nothing better for a certain kind of person. And so, yeah, that's my mish. That's my
Do you
niche.
think that it's because we have a little bit of shame around, like the shame piece? Do you think that's because we're making ends meet? Do you think that it's like an economic, creatives aren't paid that well, that kind of thing? Like, and the solopreneur or the freelancer is in, especially in our kind of demographic, being women as well, and not being tall poppy. You think it's tied, or it could be tied to the fact that it's like social media, for example, taking those retainers. I'm doing that for a financial sake, but I'm not sure. I want to work out where that shame comes from to be like, I don't want to say I do social media because does that cheapen me? Or what is it about it that we're so anti saying that we do a plethora of things?
I think there's a few things. Like I think that could be part of it for some people. I think we are so conditioned to be tied to our job title and
that's
the
your
business
worth.
Your worth is tied to your job title, the business that you work for. Like there's a lot of ego wrapped up in our careers, and we, the first thing that people say when they introduce themselves is like, hey, I'm, so-and-so, I work here. It's like the way to place people. And so when people step off that corporate ladder or decide to kind of turn their back on a career that they've spent potentially 10 years, 20 years building, and they can't respond by saying, hey, I work for Mecca or I work for Uniqlo or I have this business, Cinema Tom. They go, well, I kind of do a lot of different things. I do X, Y, Z. Like there's a real hit to the ego. And I have spoken to so many people who've said to me, at all levels, CEO level right down to kind of, freelancer, creator, individual contributor. And people have said to me, like, I have spent so long, climbing the career ladder or, going towards this sort of career goal, and I've reached it and I fucking hate it. This is not like where I want to be, but I'm terrified, terrified of turning my back on all of the effort that I've put into this career to kind of do what I know will be fulfilling and right for me, which is a portfolio career of lots of different things.
Yeah.
But there's so much ego tied up in that, and it's a really difficult decision for people to make. Like, I'll be honest, when I left Lady Brains, my goal wasn't to have a portfolio career. My goal was to get a job in venture capital. And that was ego-driven because I was like, oh, my God. Like, one of the really big things that played in my mind is, what are people going to think of me? I've spent, 6 years building this relatively public brand that had quite a lot of success with the podcast, and I'm stepping away to kind of do I don't know what. And so I thought, a venture capital job is sexy. That will look great on my LinkedIn.
Not a lot of females doing it.
Not a lot of females doing it.
Trailblaze.
Yeah, trailblaze. It was also connected to the work that we were doing at Lady Brains. Naively, I was like, I can make change from the inside. Oh my God, lol. It's so embarrassing even thinking about that now.
But like amazing.
But that was really my goal. And I actually went relatively far down the path of interviewing for a bunch of different VC firms in Melbourne and Sydney. And as I was doing that, I was also speaking to a lot of startup founders and just people in my network.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the same week, I think. I was pretty far down the line for basically like one of the VC firms that I wanted to work for. It was like a dream role. And then I landed this really cool contract with an American tech startup and a lucrative contract as well, like more than I would have been earning in a full-time job. And I was at this crossroads. I'm like, I've got to make a decision. Like, what path am I going to go down? Am I going to go down the sexy VC full-time job path, or am I going to go work for this random tech American business for a bit and see what happens? I didn't have the language of portfolio career at the time. And my intuition was like, don't take the job. Don't take it. And like, look at where I am now. Like it was absolutely the right call for me, but it was a decision I had to make, and I was totally tempted to do the thing that satisfied my ego. And so I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah.
Because it's still a really uncharted space. Like doing a lot of random stuff is still seen as a bit weird.
Yeah. I think also our parents are of a generation where security and all that, so all the people that care about you and love you are conditioning you to have security, but you're actually just adding another wonderful feather onto your cap, but nobody really sees it like that.
Yeah. And interestingly, like my family's pretty entrepreneurial. Like my mum had her own business and, you know, my brother-in-law has his own startup and my dad's worked for himself. And so they kind of got it. They sort of got it, but it's only now that I'm speaking actively about it as a portfolio career that I guess they and then everyone else is like, oh, actually, this is a legitimate career path. Like, it's not a stopgap before I do something else.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be going back to being a full-time employee and probably not a full-time founder.
Yeah.
Never say never, but probably not. Like, this is it. Like, this is what I want to do. And it'll evolve in terms of... A
stopgap is so interesting to be like, it's not a means to an end. Like, this is it. And I think a lot of even motherhood would probably benefit from the fact that you can have a portfolio career and also, but the pie chart is you being a mum and doing other bits or working part-time and doing a little bit of this, doing a little bit of that. Like an episode really, I'm so sorry guys, there's gardeners outside doing it.
Is that a lawnmower or like it's
a leaf blower?
Whippersnapper?
I think it's a leaf blower and I'm sorry, but whatever. Hopefully our voices drown it out with the vibes.
It'll go away eventually.
It's getting louder and louder, but anyway, it's fine. The Claire Smith had Josh on their podcast and they talked about it, and so many people said to Josh, oh, you're working they sold Soda Shades, got out of that deal, whatever, and then they moved into parenthood. Josh's role in that marriage and in their life is to be a lot of the time the stay-at-home dad for Harvey and their new baby on the way. And so many people gave him the, yeah, man, they're like, what's next? He's like, no, this is it now. There's also, I've had a lot of shame to overcome acting. People were like to me, oh, you still acting? And a lot of actors that we get treated, I guess, I stopped acting maybe 2017 after I won a film at Trop Fest, and then I moved into Cinematom because it just sort of like I just went where the energy was. And a lot of people like still kind of trying to shame me on it. They're like, are you still acting? Like, were you in New York for a while? You like really wanted that. And I was like, yeah. But right now I'm in this stage of my career where I just want the control, and acting is the one job where you can outwork anyone humanly possible and you won't see results. Yeah. Because it's literally just about your face or the way that you emote or whatever. And it's so dependent on the scripts that are coming through and the market and the financing and all that. Like, it's not something that you can just create for yourself as much as people may think it is. So a portfolio career is so healthy. Thank you for doing all this wonderful amplification, because I think it's going to change so many perspectives, but also give a lot of people a lot of confidence.
And permission as well.
Yeah.
I think like that's one thing that a lot of people have said to me. It's like, this has given me a label to explain what it is to myself and to others, but also the permission to actually actively pursue this as something that's like an actual goal, not just like a plan B.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah.
So what was your full-time at Lady Brains has now become, what's the plethora of what you do now?
What's the portfolio? So I do quite a few different things, and I kind of think about the portfolio of work in being made up of not only financial, like money-generating activities, although that's obviously really important, but creative pursuits as well. So from a financial perspective, I contract for startups, so tech, beauty, consumer, like health and wellness.
What do you do? What do you help them with?
So I'm a generalist. So which I actually think is really another sort of tangential, interesting conversation. But I'm a really like true generalist. And so I have worked on so many different kinds of projects. So this American tech startup that I was working with, I came on board when they were pre-product, pre-revenue. They had like the bones of their website. They had the bones of the product. They had a few engineers, and I was basically brought on board to launch the business globally. And that global launch happened to be in Australia, and then scale that business into the US. And so that was, I mean, it was kind of it was like one of the first people outside of the product team in the business. And so I was kind of doing everything: sales, marketing, brand, research. Right. So yeah, that was kind of like a go-to-market project, I guess. I'm contracting for another very well-known beauty brand, which I can't talk too much about at the moment, but basically I'm helping them expand into the US, into retail in the US. They're a huge brand everywhere else in the world, but they haven't cracked the US yet. So I'm kind of working on a project and a strategy to help them launch there. So those sorts of examples are what I call fractional work. So I'm really embedded into a team.
Yeah.
Might be 1 or 2 days a week. I'm leading one sort of piece of work that kind of sits outside of the business's daily operations. Typically, I'm working directly with the founders. There's some strategy. There's also deliverables and execution. And so it's kind of like a part-time job, but I mean, yeah, it's kind of like a part-time.
Serve a main goal.
A really specific purpose. Like typically I'm brought on board to deliver a project.
That will end, right?
That will end. Yeah. Although both of those contracts, one was an 18-month long contract, and the beauty brand I've been working on and off with for almost 2 years now.
Wow.
So that contracting work or fractional work is such a key part of my portfolio because it's financial security. And so those 1 to 2 days a week are like, it's almost like a wage basically. So I think that will probably always make up at least some part of my portfolio, that kind of fractional work. And I like it. Like, I work for myself. It's lonely. So It's nice to be able to be part of a team and go into an office every month or something and kind of start to build those relationships within a business. So I do that. Then I also do quite a lot of advisory. So advisory is like more strategic kind of engagements. I'm not responsible for deliverables. Brands might come to me and be like, hey, I want to get into Mecca. How do I do that?
Yeah, okay.
Or, I need help building out my go-to-market strategy. Can you help, kind of thing?
Yeah.
So I'll do that sort of advisory work, which I love. I also do portfolio career mentoring. So people who are either in corporates or kind of in the early stages of working for themselves, wanting to build out like a diversified and varied portfolio of work, come to me and go, can you help me kind of guide me into sort of how to do that? So I love that one-on-one mentoring. It's awesome. I write a lot.
Yeah.
I do a little bit of paid freelance writing, but my vast majority of writing is on Substack by my newsletter, which we can talk about.
Yes.
Such a great platform. And then I'm about to launch my first digital product, which is basically what I call the Portfolio Career Operating System, which is essentially...
And it's on Notion, which I can't fucking wait for because I'm a Notion girly.
Notion. Everyone in the world should be Notion. People. Yeah. It's the best.
Yeah.
And basically it's a templated version of how I run my entire life, including my business, how I sell to clients, how I market myself, my process for creating content.
How are you going to put that into Notion though? Like what are we literally seeing?
Like, so it's the template and then it's like the whole system, you work from Notion.
Okay.
So like your whole sales pipeline and like...
Oh my God, we need this.
I mean, I like obsessed with Notion. So this is how I've run my life and now portfolio career and business for the last however many years. But like I'm very much an operator. So I'm someone who likes systems. I like workflows. I like templated stuff. I like tasks to be organized. Like that's how I like can operate and do so many things. Yeah. And so I've basically taken that whole system and templated it so people can kind of effectively work in the same way that I work or customize it if they don't have the same brain as me, which they won't.
Okay. Oh my God, I love this. Okay.
And then I kind of do, some speaking gigs and I have an art project that I was hoping to kind of bring to life this year, but I just didn't have time. So that's totally separate from startup work and portfolio careers. It's like a completely creative project that I hope to bring to life next year, which is just purely for creativity's sake and fun.
I love that. We need more of that.
Yeah.
It's hard when we're, to justify allocating time.
I know, but
it's so hard.
But I guess it all comes down to values, obviously, but then capacity. Like I think there's always an ebb and flow. Like there have absolutely been times in my portfolio career life where I have way overcommitted and brought on too much contracting work and have been super burnt out.
Yeah.
But I've learned that lesson. And so now I'm like, you know what? I give myself Mondays for creativity. I never do client work or any kind of delivery on Mondays ever. That's my creative day. So I write, I work on creative projects, I create content, which I really enjoy.
Yeah.
And so I never, ever overcommit to clients more than 4 days a week, ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to me about the personal battle that you faced, because when you made this shift and you go through having it all planned out and being like, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this, and of course your Notion board would have been absolutely popping off with like how to get there.
Tasks
and plans and all that stuff.
Totally.
Versus the concept of just learning through the process and diving into something and then just figuring it out. I have been one to just figure it out. Kind of, but I think I've got to do that in balance. I can't just figure out too many tasks at the same time. I bit off more than I could chew recently. If we imagine like a Gantt chart, and I had like a timeline project essentially, I had too many projects running at the same time that I was jumping out of the plane and building the parachute on the way down, and it sent me into a schmozzle. I was like, fuck, there's too much here that I'm just flying by the seat of my pants to work out. And although I appreciate that, doing it for every single element of my own portfolio career was a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
So there was nothing that I relied on for systems and processes that had already been set up. Yeah. I was fully in all of it. So how did you overcome that? And how can people overcome that?
Well, it was interesting because I was kind of at that point last January when I had that kind of moment where I had to make a decision to kind of go down the VC path and get a job and, you know, channel all of my energy into that, versus take on this contracting gig and see what happened.
Yeah.
You know, I was very much like there was a decision point there, and I obviously chose the contracting path, but at the time that happened, I was also like, I want to write, and I had this real creative urge to write. Like, I can't explain it.
It was Carrie Bradshaw on the laptop.
Maybe, I don't know. I was just couldn't explain where it came from. It was like this overarching thing. And I started off the year, January 4th, 2023, and I was like, okay, what's my goal? What's my writing goal? I want to write a book. How am I going to get there? What are the milestones?
Yeah.
And then I thought to myself, like, I've done this every fucking year. I've set this goal to write a book or get a book proposal, and I've done fuck all to actually make it a reality. So this year in 2023, I am going to kill all of that. I'm going to surrender to the process, and I'm going to write for 30 minutes every single day.
Right.
That was my goal. Originally, it was 30 minutes every single day in Jan. And when I did that, I was like, it's 30 minutes every single day for the whole year. Mm-hmm. And I really just kind of changed my mindset around like surrendering to the process and giving myself a time and a space to explore. And so I wrote for 30 minutes every single day for 9 months until September. And in September, I was like, all right, I've done enough sort of fucking about now. Like, let's actually start a newsletter, because that was always kind of something I wanted to do. And so I started my Substack. And the week that I started that Substack, I took a writing course by David Perel, who's this amazing online writer. Like, he's just so fantastic. It was the most amazing course. Sadly, he doesn't do it anymore. But in the first lesson of that course, he talked about this concept called the architect versus the archaeologist, and I actually wrote a post about this on Substack a few weeks ago. And basically, and this was like an insane unlock for me in terms of just embracing the process of not having a plan and not knowing where I'm going and trusting that it would all figure itself out. And so basically this framework is like an approach to how to build things. So it's an approach to how to build your business, personal brand, product, service, community, audience, like anything. And so the architect is a person who has a really clear vision in their mind of what they want to create. They can see the house. They know how to do all the drawings to kind of step them there. They're totally singularly focused. Everything they do is by design. It's like, yes, I know exactly what I want to create, and they go after it. Everyone thinks that's what you need to be in order to build anything. Everyone, most people, including myself before I started my Substack, was like, I need to have a niche. Like, I need to have a topic. I need to have a focus for my Substack. Otherwise, like, what is it?
Yeah.
And that really stopped me from actually putting any of my ideas into the world. It does. Because like, you're sort of like, I need a point of view. A lot of people say to me, like, I need an edge. Like, there's so many people writing. There are so many podcasts. There's so many businesses. Like, I need to have a really strong point of difference and an edge. And I believed that as well until I heard this concept and then kind of fully went down the other path. So the other path is the archaeologist. And so the archaeologist doesn't have a clear vision in their mind of what they want to create, but they're prepared to explore an area and dig. And they dig and they discover and they dig and they discover and they search for clues. And over time, the house, which is submerged in the dirt, becomes visible to you. And so for me, being an archaeologist, what that meant was, like, I'm just going to start this Substack and I'm going to write about anything that I think is interesting to people and also, you know, what's coming from my own heart, experience, etc. And I'm going to put stuff out into the world. I'm going to talk to lots of people. I'm going to meet with lots of startups. I'm going to talk to like lots of people to see if there are like product or service ideas that I could conceptualize for myself. And through this process of putting a lot of stuff out into the world, over time, I landed on a niche anyway, portfolio careers, which, you know, if someone had said to me at the beginning, like, pick a niche and then just go after it, like, how do you know that's what you want to write about or create or do?
Totally.
And so through the process of like 9 months of just putting anything into the world, I stumbled across this niche, which I'm now building a whole platform and brand around. And it is so authentic and aligned with like who I am and my passions.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I'm just in such a better place because I gave myself the permission to explore. And I like explaining that framework because I think it gives so many people permission to just start. Like, you don't need to have a really strong point of view. Some people do. Like, some people are architects, but I would say most people aren't. Most people are archaeologists.
Interesting.
So that was really the unlock for me to be like, Anna, like, just throw the plan in the bin. Now I don't really set goals for myself. I set habits for myself. And I just focus on the core habits that I know are important in terms of what I want to do big picture in my life and career. And that's it.
How do you then reverse engineer or set milestones for things like that? Like, if you were to be like, okay, I want, say your big beauty client launches in the US and then it wraps up after 6 months and then they say, okay, we're now looking for like a global head of whatever. Thank you for your time with us, Anna. And you want to replace that wage / juicy client, you would obviously be setting a goal for yourself then to be like, okay, I need to replace them. And you're like, with your own goals financially and increasing what your worth is and all that, how do you then go about new things and new goals that you've got?
Well,
how do they become habits?
Interesting. I mean, if in that particular situation, like, I wouldn't set a goal for myself to land another client. I would set the habit to reach out to 10 people per day and have conversations. Because I'd be like, you know, for me, it's like, you know, I have a big picture idea. Like, you know, I know I want to write a book one day. Like, but my habit is shipping a weekly newsletter that's like the best possible writing I can do and actually writing every single day in addition to that. So, you know, I mean, this year I had a broad brush goal that I wanted to launch a digital product. I had absolutely no idea how that was going to come to life, but the habit I set for myself was I want to speak to, you know, and reach out to and speak to my readers every single day to understand who they are, what problems they have, what gaps can I serve? Like, so to me, like, it's, I don't know, this is just how my brain has been trained now. Like, I have a direction, but I miss that goal setting part. Like, if I set a goal, it's pretty loose.
Okay.
And I always think about, like, what is the underpinning core habit, the thing that I can do every day or every week within that same domain that will actually get me there.
Do you think if you were the architect, you would have the goal set out?
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. I mean, everyone's brain's different, but I'm somebody who really, like, everyone says this, but I'm such a believer in, like, action over strategy. And I actually think that strategy comes from action. So, you know, in my previous world when I was in corporate and worked for Mecca and, you know, like, a huge part of what I did was strategy. And I only think, particularly if you're working for yourself and you're in a smaller environment, strategy comes from information and information comes from action. data comes from putting stuff out into the world and seeing what comes back.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily just come from like your own conceptualizations. And so I have a strategic lens, I guess, that directs what I do. But everything comes down to like, what am I actually putting into the world? Who am I speaking to? What am I writing about? What's the response? What can I double down on? Like for me, it's all about kind of collecting that data and then using that to inform where I go.
I do that a lot with new clients that I work with.
Yeah.
They're like, we need a strategy. And I'm like, yes, you need a strategy, but you also need to loosely throw shit at a wall and see what's going to stick for you. Let's look at like what kind of videos and content you can see yourself making. Let's set a goal to make them, and then we'll assess if it feels right for you to go down that path, because so many brands will be like, I want to do founder videos, like comedy, like let's do that and set it up. But everything feels forced. Yeah. And it doesn't actually work because it's not true to you. You've just articulated it really well.
Yeah. And I think like there's a time for strategy. Like if I think about kind of what I'm kind of thinking about doing next year, there's obviously this portfolio career space that I'm building, I don't know, like a community around, and I'm trying to sort of be a leading voice in that space. And so, you know, there's a bit of strategy around, well, how do I actually build out an offering that supports people who want to do that? But I'm sort of at a point where I'm thinking about it strategically now, because I have 18 months worth of data and putting stuff out there and throwing shit against the wall to be able to kind of direct that thinking.
For sure.
But even with that strategic thinking piece, it doesn't stop me from writing every day. It doesn't stop me from reaching out to a new potential client every day. It doesn't stop me from having, you know, conversations with customers or readers every single day to be like, who are you and how can I help? Like there are some really core foundational habits that I think are the foundation of like any business or portfolio career or personal brand building or whatever you want to do. And well, I think there are, I mean.
Well, you think that there are. I think that's it. That's
no, I think that there are. I think there's probably like two.
Okay.
There's probably a few, but I think every opportunity comes through a person. And so in my mind, there are two ways to connect with people. One is putting content into the world. You would know that more than anyone. It's like you put your ideas and your thoughts and your opinions and into the world, and you connect with people who sort of are on the same wavelength. And so for me, that's writing and putting my ideas into the world. But I think the power of showing up online and building your personal brand cannot be like undervalued. Like it's huge. And then for me, the other is like really intentionally building my network.
Yeah. It's so underrated, I think.
It's everything.
Yeah. When you look at capacity, it's alarming how like, yes, and like all the energy and like we can chat to people, and then like you network and people want to work with you, but you're only working technically 4 days a week.
Well, right? I work probably 7 days a week, really, if I'm honest, but I do 4 days of client work a week.
Okay.
Capacity is really hard, and I've learnt, like, I've made heaps of mistakes around kind of managing my capacity. Like particularly when I kind of started this early last year, I was fortunate in that I was able to land some really good projects quite quickly, and I am like in recovery people pleaser, and I find it really difficult to say no. At least I did.
In recovery. Good work.
In recovery. Like I would definitely not say recovered.
Yeah.
Like deep recovery. But I got to a point where I was contracting 7 days a week, and I was like, Anna, you're insane. Like I was like contracted for my time 7 days a week.
Wow.
And there were a few reasons for that, not only because I couldn't say no. They were all really amazing projects. And at that time, I was like, I want to build my portfolio of case studies that I can leverage later on, whatever. But I got burnt out, and it was really tough. So I ended up wrapping up a couple of clients and not making that mistake again. But capacity is interesting. Like I do 4 days of client work. My Mondays is my creative day. But I write Saturdays and Sundays. Like I guess I'm constantly kind of on and thinking about, thinking about stuff. So I'm probably not the best person to talk to in terms of like setting boundaries around your
I'm learning
time,
it right now.
And particularly if you love what you do, it's difficult. I find it hard.
Yeah, it is really tricky.
Yeah.
The way of which you manage your own clients, do you do that in terms of client work breaking down hour by hour to look at what you've got left? How do you operate that?
Every time I engage with a client, I have a couple of rules, and I've been really, really grateful that I've worked with amazing businesses who are happy to kind of, work this way. But I'll never commit to days for a particular client. So I'll never say like, hey, you've got me on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Or I don't commit to hours because I work across a lot of different time zones. And I work fully remotely, although one of my clients I kind of go in every fortnight, which I love. So I have full flexibility in my calendar, which is really helpful for me because I find it difficult to sort of dedicate specific blocks of time to specific things. But in terms of my capacity, so loosely the way I think about it is I do 1 to 2 days a week of kind of contracting and fractional work with businesses, and then I do 1 to 2 days a week of mentoring, like one-on-one mentoring. And then I have 1 day a week for like creative projects and content and writing and all of that sort of stuff. And I mean, practically speaking, I use an app called Harvest, and I time my kind of client work because I bill by a day rate or an hourly rate. But then I actually also track, not so much anymore, but in the beginning, I sort of tracked how long it took me to do different tasks in my business just to get an understanding of how long stuff takes so that you can kind of map out like what an ideal work structure per week would look like. So, I did that when I launched my mentoring. Even though I have 1 hour or 4 hours of touch time with a person, there's pre-work, there's, async support, onboarding, I do a lot of async stuff with them. So that was an exercise for me to go like, okay, in a typical engagement, it might be 4 hours of touch time, but it might be 10 hours of actual time. And
it's so underrated. I just started using this thing called Toggle.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it basically I can put every team member down.
Yeah.
Put a little palm tree on the days that they're not with me because everybody's sort of like a day rate sort of a feeling at the moment. And and then it has a little thing per action, a little dollar sign to mark something if it's billable or not.
Yeah.
It is fucking alarming how much I do that's not billable.
Yeah.
So huge work in the new year is going to be looking at billable clients and then also looking at what's billable for the podcast and all of this work. My main editor at the moment, Tyler, does all the podcast work. But is that actually a good use of time? Should we be working with a junior editor to be doing all of that? Like, how do we?
Yeah.
It's so important, but it's so alarming when you figure it out.
It starts with, you have to track it at first. Like, it's really difficult to plan your capacity if you don't know how long things take, roughly, And so it's a pretty important part of, figuring out how to spend your time.
It's tricky to admit that being 7 years into Cinematom and being like, ooh, I've of course looked at days before and I think it comes in ebbs and flows of when you have the appetite to do that kind of work.
Yeah.
But the fact that I'm putting a rocket under my ass 7 years in is embarrassing to me.
No, why?
Because I'm like, what the fuck? How have you not done the work that deserves yet? But it's a totally different structure of Cinematom now than what it was 3 years ago. So I guess it's all relative.
Yeah.
So how do you know what to say no to?
Yeah, I used to suck at it.
Same.
And I'm getting better at it. And interestingly, it's kind of probably contradictory to what I just said before around wanting data, but most of my decision making comes from my gut these days.
Yeah.
Which has been a bit of a journey for me because I've always been a very head focused analytical person, but I think writing and accessing my creativity has been it sounds a bit over the top, but it's been almost like a spiritual experience for me. And
because you haven't expressed necessarily like that before, and it also creates a barrier of trust.
Yeah.
And the relationship with the self strengthens.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's allowed me very much to kind of tap into my own intuition and intuitively know is this the right pathway or decision or partnership or collaboration or is it not? But it's still really hard. Somebody approached me this week who this person was has been on my list of people that I want to be friends with. It's someone in business, just be friends with, but also just be around. Incredible founder, leader, voice, just an amazing person. who reached out wanting to collaborate on something, and I'm wrestling with it at the moment because I think my gut's telling me no.
Oh, shit.
But my head's like, you're fucking crazy. Like, definitely, absolutely yes. But I think my gut's telling me no because I think there's some, like, that energy should be directed towards something else and towards what I'm building myself. So it's a process, but I think, like, everyone says it, but, like, you can't go past your gut. Like, your gut knows. It does.
Yeah, I'm wrestling at the moment with taking on new clients and then building out the team versus staying laser focused, because laser focus has allowed the podcast to grow and Cinema Tom to have, not the bones were broken before this year, but it's different and it's an evolution. It's sort of like a 2.0 recalibration that I'm in at the moment. My gut says, build out a social media agency and don't turn these clients away. But data has proven when I'm all in on one thing, I can grow it very specifically, purposefully, and the success is the writing's on the wall that I should hone in on focus rather than grow and delegate. But how's a business supposed to operate if I'm like laser focused on one thing? Lots of, I don't know, I've got to unpack that one for myself. But anyway.
It's hard. It's so hard, especially when, like, lots of those opportunities are good opportunities. But I think what I've learned is, like, there is an abundance of good opportunities out there. Like, there are so many ways that you could grow your business, all of them totally valid, probably a lot of them really exciting. And it's just like, what kind of business do you want to build? What kind of life do you want to live?
It's also with that thing about, like, freedom in business and, like, I want freedom to, you know, take my dog down to the beach one day. Technically, you're going to do that when you're quiet, when you don't have too much on your plate. But then you look at capacity and you're like, well, I've got a room for an extra client. Let's go. I'm grappling with that at the moment of, can I just clock off at 3?
Oh, that's hard, isn't it?
Like, yeah, technically you can. You can do whatever the fuck you want. But should you? No. But who said?
Yeah.
It's so weird.
I know. I am equally as uncomfortable when I'm overworked and overcommitted as I am when have too much free time. I find too much free time or, like, not, you know, I find that uncomfortable because it's like, I took half a Friday off the other day to go and have lunch with my mum and I was like, this feels weird.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this is the career that I've exactly.
That's why we did it.
I know.
So, like, why are we so no. You must be chained to the desk for productivity.
I know.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But more isn't always more. I have to keep reminding myself, like, particularly when you're doing something creative, like, that free time, that free space actually is productive. Because that's when your ideas germinate and, like, when you have freedom to just, like, think and ideate.
But it's not the same as when you, like, schedule it in.
No, I know.
You know?
I know.
So I wish I could. But I guess giving yourself the whole expansive Monday is really clever.
Yes.
Because then it's not like 2 to 4, I go for walks. Yeah. It's like, no, wait, there's a whole day here for you to mosey on things and potter.
Yeah. And I've tried lots of different things. Like, I've experimented with my schedule heaps over the last 2 years. Like, I have tried, you know, just purely 4 days worth of working and then having a 3-day full weekend. I've tried, like, you know, clocking in late and then working in the afternoon and then vice versa, starting early and then clocking off at 2. But for me, I like the Mondays of the day. Like, I like to start the week, ease in, be creative, get some, like, deep kind of fun work done.
Yeah.
And then, you know, roll into 4 full days worth of work. That just, like, that works for me. But I've experimented heaps.
Let's talk about going all in, because I did with the podcast in February and I was like, we're doing it for a year, and if I don't see substantial growth that feels right and the energy's there and that I have shiny sparkles in my eye about the little glint of continuing this, we'll stop it. The fact of the matter is it's very glinty over here and I love it.
Look at all of this sparkle.
We're in the podcast studio. That's why she's like sparkle. But the way that it feels when you've gone all in, and also the relationship with myself, like we just touched on, of choosing to do that for yourself. I fully pulled back client work and was like, like, this year has not been profitable in a little bit, but probably on paper. In cash flow.
Yeah.
No. The way that it's all happened. And then through this and through the relationships and everything that I've now built, not only has it got trust with myself, but it's got trust with my audience because I'm there for them every single week without fail. I have conniptions if I have to put out an episode on Monday because they'll wait for it on the Sunday and they'll think it won't come. But it's crazy.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the decision of going all in and with Substack as your platform.
Yeah.
How did you get to that?
Well, I kind of procrastinated on it for 9 months. Like I wrote for 30 minutes every single day for 9 months before I started my Substack. And to be honest, I always wanted to. Like I always knew eventually that I would write the newsletter, but because I thought I needed a niche and I thought I wasn't ready and all of that crap that was swirling on in my head, I didn't. And actually it's kind of funny, but like the reason that I actually pulled the trigger and went all in, it's not some big crazy reason, but do you know Plant Mama?
No.
Pasta Mama. Anyway, she's this creative, like amazing woman who runs these beautiful pasta events, and like she does a whole bunch of stuff. She's like super creative and just really cool. And she started a Substack, and the way that she framed it up is she's like, you know, I don't know what this is going to be, but it's going to be chaotic like me. I'm going to talk about food one day. I'm going to talk about Italy the next. And, you know, it's just a reflection of who I am. And I saw that, and I was in Italy at the time. I was in Rome at the time, I think. And I just got so much FOMO. Literally, I was like, oh, this is what I should be doing. Like I just had this real sense of, oh my God, I'm missing out. Like why can't I do the same thing?
Yeah.
And that was literally the trigger for me to just start. And I think, so I'm massively driven by FOMO evidently. But I think the other thing was I had 9 months worth of proof that I could do it because I had written for 9 months every day. And I had so many half-finished posts and essays there. I'd had quite a lot of stuff published in Fashion Journal and other publications. And I really was like, because I was like you, I'm like, I'm not starting this unless I'm doing it every week. Because I'm a big believer in, particularly if you're wanting to build a podcast or an audience or whatever, you have to ship something weekly. At Lady Brains, we did fortnightly podcasts, and I actually think that hampered our growth pretty significantly. But it was all we could do at the time, so that's fine. But for me, I was like, I'm going to ship something. It's got to be good, and I'm going to do it every week. And so I sort of had the conviction that I could do it because I had done it for 9 months.
There's a lot of power in doing something not for the public, just for the relationship with the self, and then
100%.
Going into it.
Yeah. And it was also, I got to the point where I was like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. I can't not. I just,
really?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, I've only been writing for a year and a bit. I've been building businesses for my whole career. I see myself as a writer now. Like, I see myself as a business builder, sure, but I see myself as a writer first. And
wow.
Yeah.
When did that shift happen?
I think like,
did something happen that you were
no, it wasn't like
I've got 100 subscribers.
No, it wasn't a moment. I think it was a progression. And again, like, I guess your audience is creative, so I think a lot of people will understand this. Like, it is integral to who I am. Like, it's like breathing. I can't not write. It's like, it's as important to me as breathing. I do it every day. It's like, it sits at the core of my identity now.
Wow.
And it didn't feel that way when I started, but certainly, you know, I think I'm about 67 weeks in or something with my Substack. And now it's just like, it's just part of who I am.
So now you post a piece every week?
Every Friday.
You're writing 30 minutes daily?
At least.
How do those pieces then turn into your
shape up?
So, yeah. Are you like, oh, we need something to talk about. What have I written this week that's of interest?
No. So this is all, you'll see this in my operating system, but I have a Notion idea capture, like a place where I capture my ideas. And I typically use my mobile, like my phone, and I have, it's a very simple database. The mobile. I use the mobile, the iPhone. And
yeah,
my whole writing process starts with capturing ideas from my brain and putting it into my Notion. So I have thousands of ideas in there, and I'm literally like a psycho. It's like I listen to a podcast, someone says something interesting, I'll write it down.
Yeah.
Random thought pops in my head, I'll write it down. And then so I have this kind of huge database of ideas, and I have these sort of subcategories that I file shit into. So there's like habits and portfolio careers and personal brand and relationships, spirituality, just a whole bunch of stuff. And so typically each week, like I ship my newsletter on the Friday. Typically Saturday is my day off writing, but sometimes I do. And then on Sunday, I'll kind of choose the idea or the post for the following week. sometimes I know way in advance because I'm just feeling like I really want to talk about this, or lots of my community are asking this question or whatever. Other times I'm like, all right, let's go into the database, search what's drawing me, or what do I think will be interesting. And so I pick the idea on the Monday, I do the shitty draft. I pick the idea on the Sunday and I try and do the shitty draft on the Sunday, which is literally like the shittiest of shit drafts, like the worst possible draft ever, just a brain dump of ideas, sometimes dot points. And then I'll just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'll just refine every day. So
you're not writing new ideas every day. No. You're writing in the act of writing, but you're technically editing.
Yeah, technically editing. I mean, I also write a lot on LinkedIn and like other platforms and stuff like that. But I'm technically, I'd say, if we want to get really specific about it, I'd say like Sunday, Monday, I'm like writing a piece.
Right.
And then I edit and 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 I polish and I polish and I polish and I polish.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like I'm absolutely not a person who can sit down and write one piece end to end in 2 hours.
Yeah, okay.
I think I've done that once in my whole life. Like that's just not how my brain works.
What do you think of personal brand? In terms of like if somebody was listening to this and they really wanted to start to express themselves, where do you sort of guide them? Like with your own portfolio career mentorees, do you tell them to start a personal brand as well? Are you pushing that message?
I think it is the single most powerful thing that you can do if you want to work for yourself in whatever way you want to work for yourself. It has been like the difference between me being able to build this type of career and relatively easily land work and build a community of people who are interested in what I have to say. It's everything. And I always hated it. Like I always hated the idea of kind of showing up online. And, you know, really if I think about Lady Brains, like Caitlin and I were at the centre of that business, but we very rarely put our own thoughts and opinions into the world. It was intentionally a platform to showcase other people's stories.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was an intentional decision because we wanted to platform other wonderful people's stories, and it was intentionally not about us, it was about other people. But there was probably a bit of fear in that decision as well around putting ourselves out there. And it wasn't until I started writing that I guess I started building a personal brand, but I wasn't thinking about it like that. I was just thinking about putting my ideas into the world. And so like with the people that I mentor who are looking to build portfolio careers, I'm a massive advocate of starting to share your thoughts and opinions with the world. I don't think it needs to be done in a salesy, ego-driven way. I don't think it needs to be done like in the most polished, high-stakes, amazing way, but it's like putting stuff into the world and building your reputation, I guess, online and in person. Like it just opens up opportunities.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't been writing my stuff online. Even though we're friends, like I knew you beforehand, like you would never have thought to be like, oh, let's have a chat to Anna.
Yeah, if you were in the fog of LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly.
Posting away and I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh. But like because you're so repetitive and you're getting noticed, it definitely rises you to the top of the
chatter.
Yeah.
I think also like one of the kind of like, I don't know, values, I guess, that drives what I talk about and write about is like authenticity and vulnerability, not ego. So I'm never online being like, hey, I did this thing, like how good am I? At least I try not to be. Like I try to show up in a way that's kind of vulnerable and I'm like, oh, I fucked up this, or this is the thing that I stuffed up, or, you know, this is what I learned. And I think that's been really amazing in terms of creating connections. And the other thing is I build in public.
Yeah.
Like on LinkedIn, everyone, not that you love LinkedIn, but on LinkedIn, you know, I do a monthly review of my portfolio career every month. Like
building in public is so interesting.
Like how many sales calls did I have? What was my conversion? How does my portfolio of income look each month? It changes. What was really great this month? What did I win? You know, what did I learn? Like all of that stuff is public. And I think, again, that's probably why I've generated, had a bit of traction and kind of been able to build a quite engaged community of readers because, like, I'm going through this entire journey in public. Like, people have been along the ride with me as I've discovered portfolio careers and they're like, oh, my God, that's so cool. Like, so I think that's really powerful. And it's not about kind of showing up and being like, I'm a thought leader.
No.
I'm here to teach you.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Like,
It's documenting.
Yeah, follow along if you
Yeah.
think it's cool. If you don't, cool.
The personal brand and getting your opinions and thoughts out online has been a really challenging one for me personally because my parents, since I was born, have been in the hotel industry. And when you're in the hotel industry, you're in the service industry and you have so many people there that are all from all walks of life, that thing of don't talk politics at parties. Also, don't talk politics or share anything to do with yourself in the lobby ever. Because
is that a rule?
No, but everything about the guest as the customer is right.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes in there and they say the weather outside's disgusting, they're right, it is disgusting. Everything about them is correct and everything about you is hidden because in luxury hotels it's not about you, you're there to serve.
Yeah.
And I went through I went to drama school in New York. So when you go through those literal experiences and everything is sort of about what's happening and what you can channel and your emotions and you crack open, you're a vessel, all of that. That's one thing. But then when you come into shaping opinions, especially as a woman in film, because God forbid we weren't really allowed to have any, that in the Me Too movement and all of that, my growth has been so aligned with all of those things. It hasn't been until my parents sold the hotel 2 years ago that I think I've actually been able to define a voice because my parents have always been Rowena and Peter from the Lisle. And in business, they were so prolific. So many people knew them.
Yeah.
So much trust came from my own clients because they had some affinity to how my parents do business and they did it well. So I was sort of in this shadow, but I haven't really realized that I thought I was in a shadow. But in terms of business and my own strength and voice, I've really been able to talk about it now that they're no longer in the picture.
Interesting.
Which is weird. And I have a fantastic relationship with them. They're two of my best friends. I love them to death. But it's fascinating that their closure created freedom
and opening for
me.
You.
Weird. But
that's so interesting.
I think because even my actions, I was almost a reflection on them as well. So if I swore too much in the podcast, my mum used to say, can you not swear so much in the podcast? And now she doesn't give a shit because it has nothing to do with her brand at all. So we were in this weird intertwining, but it was, I think a lot of people would be tying that to, and even on LinkedIn, people are like, I can't post my wins because it's not about me, it's about my boss. The personal brand around, I want to start posting and sharing, but my boss won't like it. What's that? Like the shadows that we have of like not having the freedom to come out from underneath and be our true like authentic selves because of whatever we think is crippling us. The fact of the matter is there was literally no cripples. Maybe it was my mum being like, tut, tut, don't swear. Who gives a shit? But like that piece, I read something recently that was like, I want to start like sharing the accolades online, but my boss will say, if you want to start sharing your wins here and you're in a business that like in a much bigger team, this role isn't for you.
Oh my God.
I know, like crazy, like, yeah, like people wanting to talk about it but still being in a career. So it's not, but then also people thinking, I want to share my thoughts and opinions, but it's not about my like we had Jen Day on the podcast this morning. She's like, I don't want to build out my personal brand because people will think that I'm not caring about my clients might think I'm not prioritizing them if I build out my own socials.
It's really interesting and I get that. I do get that and I reckon that there are definitely some businesses and bosses who would have an issue with it. But, I have a lot of clients and I have worked fractionally in businesses with founders who are like, go for it, like good on you. Like this is cool, so I think, I think sometimes we can perceive like constraints around our ability to do that aren't actually necessarily there. That being said, for sure, like if you're in a full-time job and your contract says that you can't share stuff online, like that is difficult. But like I always say to people like who feel like they don't want to show up and talk about their opinions or their wins or whatever, it's like just share what you're learning.
Yeah.
Like soften it, like lower the stakes. Just share like what you've learned in your past job or past career or an insight that might be valuable to other people. Like I always try and post stuff with the lens of like, will this add value to people's lives? I actually don't really talk about the wins that much. I talk about the lessons and kind of the stuff that's happening along the way. So yeah, it's a tricky one. The stroke of
I don't know how to build that. I don't know what to say. I think too many people will judge me if I like put myself out there. How do you respond to that? It's like there's fear of showing up online,
totally.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I sort of say to people kind of like, it's like I follow this learn, do, teach framework. So if you're really worried about putting something out there and being judged for it, like talk about what you've learned. Everyone can benefit from you sharing a lesson that you've learned in, you know, a tiny paragraph on LinkedIn or whatever. So that's kind of like, I think about, you know, beginner level is like just show up and write one post about something that you've learned. Like, doesn't have to be every day, doesn't have to be every week, just like one thing. Like, what is the smallest, most granular, tiny, atomic thing that you can do to start building that muscle? Because it is a muscle. It's like, you know, confidence is built through the act of doing. And so, you know, for me, like when I started showing up online as like myself and sharing my own ideas, I was like, LinkedIn is too hard, too much, and then Instagram's too much because all my friends are there. Not many people that I know are on Substack, so I'm going to start on Substack, publishing my weekly newsletter. And I published my weekly newsletter on Substack without really sharing it too much on LinkedIn for 3 months. And then I was like, Anna, pull your finger out, like share it once a week on LinkedIn. And then I just started building that muscle and building that muscle and building that muscle. And now I post all the time. But like I've experienced like hectic trolling, particularly on TikTok.
Have you?
Yeah. Not so much on other platforms, but TikTok has been like, there's been.
What's an example?
So I have been just really throwing stuff against the wall with TikTok. I avoided it for ages, but then I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to give it a crack because why not? And so I like to think about doing new things in 90-day sprints. And so I think it was June, July.
I love that.
I was like, okay, I'm going to go on a 90-day TikTok sprint, not posting every day for 90 days, but I think it was 3 times a week for 90 days.
Your focus is there, yeah.
Yeah. And so the first one I was like, I'm just going to write something about portfolio, just literally say something to the camera about portfolio careers. And I talked about how I decided to let go of traditional work, follow portfolio career, and why I think that they're the future. Threw it up, had no makeup, no lighting, no nothing, literally chucked it up. It was like my 3rd TikTok ever, the first one in my little 90-day challenge. Went viral, blew up. And I had so many people being like, you're a grifter, you've got no idea what you're talking about. Like just so much hatred. Like it was so polarizing. And like, you know, that, to be honest, that didn't really get to me. I was sort of watching it sort of a little bit detached, being like, this is interesting. So then people were like, oh, what are you trying to sell us? Like, I'm like, I literally was responding to people and I'm like, I'm trying to sell you ideas, like ideas, not courses or something. So, you know, there is absolutely like you're putting yourself out there to be critiqued or judged. And I'm sure there are people in their conversations around about who are like, oh my God, Anna, lame, like what are you doing? But the benefit of doing that far outweighs the cost in my mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where do you see portfolio careers going?
I think they're going to become much more mainstream. I can already see like there's so many sort of macro trends happening that are kind of culminating in this like opportunity. I think post-COVID, like everyone had a mental breakdown, including myself, started to question what they were doing and where they wanted to go. Remote work also became a thing. I think people started to have a bit more of a critical mind around how they were actually working and what they were doing. I think AI is like allowing individuals to do so much more and have so much more capacity than what they would have originally had. I think a lot of businesses are starting to look at fractional work and consulting as like a really good way of kind of bringing people in and out of businesses to work on projects. And I think that it's hopefully will become something that is like more aspirational and particularly for women. For everyone, but particularly women. And so I have a feeling that portfolio careers, one-person businesses are going to make up a large percentage of the workforce in the future. As the nature of the workforce changes, the structure changes, AI comes in and takes a lot of completes a lot of basic operational tasks. Like I think the actual makeup of the workforce is going to change. And I think that one-person businesses, portfolio careers, however you want to explain it.
Have you read Company of One?
I think I have read Company
It's so
of One.
good. It's really good. I
I'll have
love
to write
that
down,
book.
Company of
Yeah,
One.
it's good. I read that during COVID and I was like, holy shit. Like, it was just so amazing, like how much freedom he is and embracing that and like not feeling lonely, feeling freedom to literally make decisions. But I think back to actually reflecting on that, the point of freedom around Company of One, he wasn't like, oh, and then this afternoon I go for a walk or like I take my dog to the beach. He was more like, okay, it is a priority for my wife to actually go on a 4-week holiday, or she really wants to go see her relatives, so let's make that happen and I'll go work from the other side of the world and things like that, like in a longer term scope, not necessarily a day-to-day. It gives you freedom to really be the architect of your own life and live by a life by design rather than a 100%. Slave to your own client work.
That's what I love about portfolio careers, which is kind of what I said at the beginning, which is like everyone's takes a different shape.
Yeah.
And I'm working with people who work full-time for 3 months of the year and then take 3 months off. I'm working with other people who kind of do 4 days a week and try and keep consistently 4 days a week worth of work. Like myself, like I work 5 days a week at least, but, you know, I have my Mondays off and I, you know, sometimes my client work increases, sometimes it decreases. Like there's so much freedom and flexibility. I mean, it's not easy. Like there are hard parts about it as well. You have to learn how to sell. You have to learn how to market yourself. You have to learn how to manage lots of different things. Like you have to deal with like, you know, the challenges of riding the emotional roller coaster of not always having the same level of stability and security as you would in a full-time job. It's kind of like, you know, running your own business, right? Yeah. So, you know, there are absolutely hard parts about it as well, but there's also hard parts about being in a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like choose your heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I had a coffee yesterday with my friend Charlie, who owns VitaDrop, and he was talking to me about the story of one's career. And I was telling him how recently I've been on the international circuit for Anko, which is Kmart's product. I'm basically creative directing / content creating the whole global expansion, which is wild. And he was like, that is so good for your career. And I like kind of rolled my eyes and was like, yeah, God, I'm so tired. And he was like, yeah, but everybody needs something to hang their hat on so that you have that story that like people are like, oh, okay, what does she do? It's like, oh, they built this and then they exited and now they're doing this. You need that. Like, do you agree that you need, and like in a portfolio career, do you find even that Mecca, founding Lady Brains, and now your ability to build and expand businesses internationally and launch and your experience in Mecca and all that, like a little bit of a jumble mixed bag for you to mean this, but do you think that
yes,
you can't,
is the answer.
Yeah, like you can't just have, you need something to hang your hat on, right? Just to kick off a portfolio career.
I think it's, that's a really good point. I think it, anything's possible, but I think I have been able to step into a you know, relatively successful, whatever you want to call it, portfolio career because I had my experience at Mecca has been huge in terms of getting me into opportunities and, you know, like that's been really important. And obviously Lady Brains as well. Like we built a pretty recognizable brand. And so typically if I'm reaching out to somebody cold or wanting to book a meeting with someone, I say, you know, you might know me from, or, you know, I'm Anna from Lady Brains, or I used to work at Mecca, and I'll be able to book a meeting.
Yeah.
And obviously like with experience, you know, the more experience you have, the greater your stack of skills, the more valuable you are to a business, the more you can charge. And so I think people who are in their early 20s, you know, could definitely have a portfolio career, but it's perfect kind of career structure for somebody who has a track record.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I agree. It's interesting, to think, and I've never really thought about my story before, but I was like, oh, I'm in that era. I'm in that. That's what I'm doing. I'm laying down those bricks now. That's like, that's what I did. And I'm like, very interesting. So what are some misconceptions that you found with people building a career that blends multiple roles?
I think the biggest misconception, I don't know if a misconception is the right word, but like we kind of spoke about it before, like the idea that it's shameful or not something to be aspired to.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of people are worried to step into it because they think it'll mean they lose the high level status and their title and the job and all that sort of thing. I think doesn't have to be that way. And again, like that's why I'm sort of so vocal in this space, talking about like how great it can be. But I think that's changing. I think that's slowly changing as people kind of start to understand what the concept is. And again, like, you know, some people like to refer to a portfolio career as the gig economy or for knowledge workers. And I've spoken about that in the past as well. Like, this is the gig economy for knowledge workers. And I don't actually think that's the right terminology because, I don't know, inherently in a portfolio career, I still think it's a career. You can still, it's not a cop-out. Like, you can still build a really amazing career and be very ambitious and want to have amazing impact and build something valuable for yourself and your family and the world, just in a different work structure. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest misconception that I'm trying to change. Yeah.
Where can people find you?
They can find me on Substack, Anna Mac Stack. You can find me on TikTok.
When you thought of that name, were you like, the Anna Mac Stack?
One of the big barriers to starting my friggin' Substack was the name. So the working name for like 9 months was Bookmark. And I had this whole like concept around bookmarking, whatever. And that was just a crap name. And so when I was yeah, it's all right. So someone else can steal it. Anna Mac Stack came to me when I was on holiday in Europe and I was like, that's it.
I love that.
So you can find me on Substack and then Anna Mackenzie on all the platforms.
And are you taking on mentorees if people are really interested to have a suss of this?
Next year. Yes, 2025.
Okay.
I am. So I have a few spots in 2025. annamackenzie.com.au. I couldn't get the .com.
Yeah, it's tricky.
I know.
Yeah, I also get trolled a lot on the .com, so like you're good on.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like .com.au, it's like a little bit nicer because when we go into these big batch emails of just when the spammers grab everything, it's a little bit more niche, so they're not going, you know, and I've heard that it's actually a good thing to have AU because it Google search, it like makes you.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Excellent.
Don't troll me SEO people, but that's what I've heard. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on the pod.
My pleasure.
I feel so
fun.
inspired for my portfolio career now.
Yeah, I love it. That was fun.
Thank you so much for joining us at Process the Podcast. If you loved this episode, let us know. Please hit like, subscribe, or leave us a comment or review so we know that you're there. As a baby podcast, Process is very independent and we need all the love that we can get. Find us on socials at Process the Podcast. Follow us, keep up with all the things that we're up to over here at Process, and I will see you next Sunday.